If you like your fantasy a little less high medieval and a little more early modern, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. Welcome back to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we'll be taking a look at the first book in the Powder Mage Trilogy, Promise of Blood. Let's start by giving a short summary of what happens in the book without revealing too much. The story of the book covers a lot of different characters, but there tends to be three main characters. Those are the primary point of view characters. The first individual that you encounter is Adamant. Now, Adamant is a retired police detective, and as the book unfolds, you also discover that he had attempted to start a printing press, but you also find out that he has an incredible ability to remember everything that he has ever seen or heard, a photographic memory, though I don't think there's photography in this time period, so maybe he wouldn't say that. But Adamant is incredibly capable of research and finding things out, and that is why he's being called up by Field Marshal Tamis. Field Marshal Tamis is an interesting individual. He is clearly a very powerful, at least militarily speaking, individual who is very fed up with the ruling monarchy. And so the very beginning of the book is him successfully overthrowing the monarchy of Adro, which is one of the 9 kingdoms in the world of the Powder Mage Trilogy. You learn a little bit about some of the other kingdoms, although I couldn't give you a lot of details on most of the kingdoms. There's a couple that play a much larger role in this series, but that is the premise of this book, is that you have 9 major kingdoms, and that Adro is the kingdom on which we're focused, and the monarchy has just been overthrown by Tamis. In order to overthrow the monarchy, Tamis had to actually kill some of the most powerful sorcerers. They're called privileged, and they actually have what's called a royal cabal. You discover that pretty much all of the 9 kingdoms have some kind of royal cabal, which is a collection of these privileged individuals. They have what we'll call elemental sorcery, which means they are incredibly powerful and they can draw upon sources like fire, wind, water. It's not exactly clear what all they can do, but they are considered the most powerful in this world. As Tamis was assassinating and killing the royal cabal, or all of the privileged, they all said the same thing, and that was, you can't break Casimir's promise. He doesn't know what Casimir's promise is. He knows that Casimir is some kind of religious character in the history of this world of the 9 kingdoms, but he doesn't know what Casimir's promise is. And so this is when he brings in Adamant, and he encourages Adamant, threatens Adamant to go find out what this means, and in so doing, he offers him some opportunities to be somewhat involved in what is going to be a new government. With the success of the coup and the defeat of most of the privileged, although not all, because that will become a recurring issue, Tamis is faced with building a new government. But the thing is that this kingdom was already so stable from so many other issues that Tamis is going to find himself balancing not just trying to build a new government, but also purging the kingdom of people that were still faithful to the monarchy, despite the impact that the monarchy and all the other nobles had had on the economic stability of Adros. It appears as though Adros and its previous monarch had also gotten themselves in significant debt, and so something that Tamis quickly discovers is that there are other powers out there of the other 9 kingdoms that are interested in establishing some kind of control over Adros, particularly trying to turn them into some kind of vassal or some kind of tributary kingdom. And that, of course, is something that Tamis is very much opposed to, especially since he wants to set up some kind of more fair and more just society. The third main character in the series is Taniel. Taniel is the son of Field Marshal Tamis. Now, at the beginning of the novel, Taniel is estranged from his father ever since the death of his mother, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why Field Marshal Tamis hates the nobility so much. He blames them for the death of his wife. Also, Taniel was engaged to someone, and it was discovered that she was sleeping with somebody else, and he called it off, but it would have been a good match, at least in the eyes of Field Marshal Tamis, and so for that reason, he's upset that his son has called it off, and he has been sent off to some other country where he's been helping another group of individuals fight for their independence. Taniel returns to Adros at the behest of his father, and he is called upon his father to actually hunt down one of the most notorious privileged that he's having a hard time keeping track of and preventing from things really getting out of control with all the other issues that are going on in the city, especially since there is a revolt that is clearly boiling up of all the people that are still faithful to the original nobility. The book makes its way through these three main protagonists, Adamant, Taniel, and Tamis, and what they're doing changes a little bit from place to place. Taniel has a couple different assignments as well as Adamant, and Tamis, of course, is constantly trying to rebuild this new society, which means he is being plagued with lots of other issues that anyone trying to create a society in and of itself are going to struggle, as well as dealing with the fact that the country that he has just taken over has so many other problems of its own. These are the things that are being balanced, and it unfolds, and you have all sorts of fascinating battle scenes, chases, just a lot going on that I personally found very engaging. There seems to be 3 levels of magic. The lowest level is called Knacked, and I'm not entirely sure what causes people to be Knacked, but it's usually some kind of random ability that isn't necessarily something that most people would brag about, but some of the people in the book do have some pretty powerful, or at least I think they're powerful versions of Knacked. For example, Adamant is able to remember everything he's ever seen or read. The second most powerful is going to be the Powder Mages. The Powder Mages get their power from gunpowder, and they snort it, and they use it in almost a cocaine-like fashion. It gives them increased abilities, most notably their ability to push bullets, to control bullets, but also to control gunpowder itself, make it combust spontaneously. If they have too much of it, they seem to have a bit of an overdose reaction to it, or they have symptoms of withdrawal if they don't have it often enough. That's why I would compare it to a sense of cocaine. Tamis is a gunpowder mage, as well as his son Taniel. The third are the privileged, and they're considered the most powerful, although you do discover, with the idea of some kind of mythology and some religion that is supporting much of the ideology and much of what's pushing this book, that there do appear to be some kind of deity or godlike characters which create a whole nother level of magic, but that really comes into play at the end of the book, and I don't want to give away too much, but that is one of the big things that is the underlying driver of the whole plot. This is the first of 3 books, so this novel ends with, we won't say necessarily cliffhanger, but it definitely ends at a very dramatic moment that gives plenty of room for there to be additional novels, which we already know there are 2 more, and I'm very much looking forward to reading those novels, because this was a very entertaining and enjoyable book. I really enjoyed the world that was built. I thought it was interesting that even though it was set in a little more of an early modern time period, there's still a whole lot of elements that can be traced to your average fantasy series. This discussion of 9 kingdoms is still going to be very representative of different kingdoms and empires vying for power in what you would think of as a medieval time period, but let's face it, that happened clear through the early modern period, and I think that that's pretty represented. Another thing that I think was really fascinating was the fact that they never say it, but they're clearly heavily influenced by the French Revolution. That seems to be the type of atmosphere that is bubbling up when Thomas takes control, because much of what he says is the same type of rhetoric that we see from the French Revolution. Of course, he overthrows a king. He even specifically guillotines the king. Again, a whole bunch of stuff that is referencing the French Revolution, and on top of all that, the level of technology is right around that of the French Revolution. So we have gunpowder, but we don't seem to have any other kind of industrial revolution, so it's by no means some kind of steampunk atmosphere. Just gunpowder. That seems to be the only major innovation, but also maybe a sense of state building that is a developing concept in the early modern period that could also be represented in actual history. Who would I say this for? I'd say it's for people that enjoy fantasy, especially your classic fantasy that has that high medieval paradigm, something that I'm constantly talking about, but is a little different. I appreciated that they drew the line just a little later and didn't go all the way back to the Middle Ages. I thought it was something different, even though it was still something that I was familiar enough with. Also, it's not a huge series. It's only 3 books. None of them are all that big. I think they're all less than 600 pages, somewhere between the 500 and 600 page mark, so it's not a huge series, and I look forward to finishing the series, which won't take me that long. Who wouldn't I say this book is for? Well, I don't really know. I mean, if you like fantasy, I think you'll like this. It's not overly complicated, so if you're hoping for a really big world building series, this isn't exactly going to be that, but I will definitely say that this book definitely sets a distinct worldview that was very entertaining to me, and I think something that most people that like fantasy would enjoy. That being said, all of the main characters are white guys, and so if you are looking for some kind of diversity in your book, you're not going to find this here. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interaction with any kind of minorities or with women. There is a little bit of discussion of Adamant and his relationship with his family, especially his wife. As I've already mentioned, Field Marshal Tanis, his wife, you find out, had previously been killed by the nobility, and his son was engaged. And all these things show some kind of relationship with women, but it is by no means a major part. And I wouldn't say that there seems to be much of a love story going on, at least not that I could discern, aside from, of course, Adamant and his ongoing relationship with his wife. But we all know that a loving, long-lasting marriage is not what draws most people to a book. But I would love to hear what other people have to say about Promise of Blood and the Powder Mage Trilogy as a whole. I look forward to reviewing the next couple books as I finish them. If you have a difference of opinion or this has led you to dive into this book series, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and until next time, keep those pages turning.